Most leaders think teamwork is about trust, alignment, and getting along. But what they often want is agreement without resistance. Because teamwork feels easy when everyone's nodding, deadlines are generous, and pressure is low. But here's what no one tells you. Real teamwork isn't revealed when things are calm. It shows up when pressure hits, when time is tight, when emotions are high, and when leaders don't have the luxury of thinking out loud. Hi, I'm Antrea Dowd, and this is Purpose, Presence, People. And today we're talking about what leadership is really teaching teams in those moments, often without a word. Because when pressure shows up, teams don't fall apart. They fall into patterns leadership has been rehearsing. And once you see those patterns, you cannot unsee them. So remember this. When your team is struggling, I want you to look up, not around. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Antrea Dowd, leadership strategist, speaker, and former director of patient experience with a foundation in leadership and organizational development. I've spent my career helping leaders show up with presence, communicate with intention, and drive results through people, not pressure. This podcast is about leadership that's practical, human, and impactful. Let's begin. One look at a team tells you everything about the leader. Not because leaders control everything, but because teams reflect what leaders tolerate, what we reinforce, and what we model. What you ignore, you condone. What you condone, you create. What you're creating is organizational culture. So you are designing the culture of your team. And most organizations have aspirations of having teamwork like the 95-96 Chicago Bulls, right? High performance, trust, everyone is doing their thing, pulling their own weight and working together. But what they really want is work well together while everything is calm. But harmony doesn't equal high performance. In fact, harmony can actually mask some of the underlying issues like group thinking, silence, avoidance, polite agreement. Teamwork doesn't fall apart when everything is good and smooth sailing. It falls apart when things are hard, when we're short-staffed, and we have competing deadlines and unresolved conflict and uncertainty. You can't put highly skilled individuals together and guarantee success. Talent does not create teamwork. Pressure will test it. And so as someone who has spent many years in leadership and organizational development, I can tell you this with confidence. Pressure does not break teams. What it does, it reveals what was already there. You see, under pressure, we see poor design of the team, an unclear purpose, weak leadership signals, unresolved conflict. All pressure does is remove the facade. And so let's be honest. I know we all love to say we're a family, right? You've got your work wife, your work husband. I get it. I do it too, right? We're all family. We're in this together. But the moment things get rough, we go from being family to distant cousins. Here's a truth I teach leaders all the time. Teams don't need perfection from their leaders. What they need is someone to regulate, someone who's going to walk in and not escalate the chaos, but regulate it. As leaders, we're very quick to describe our teams as dysfunctional when they begin to struggle. But dysfunction isn't chaos. Dysfunction is not dramatic. You see, when leaders are reactive, teams become cautious. When leaders are inconsistent in their message and their treatment, teams stop trusting the process. When leaders avoid having those hard conversations, teams begin to fill in the gap with assumptions and stories that they tell themselves. None of that sounds dramatic, right? But over time, it slowly and quietly destroys your team. It looks like this: walking on eggshells, silence instead of collaboration, people doing their job but withholding their best ideas. Because teams, they don't sit around diagnosing leadership behavior, right? They don't say, something feels psychologically off today. No, they don't say that. You know what they say? They say things like, well, I'm not going to bring that up. I'll just handle this myself. It's not worth the conversation. And so what happens is when they feel unsafe or unheard or uncertain, they default to protective behaviors. Some people go to silence, don't say anything about anything. And some people go to violence, verbal violence, right? They get loud. They want to argue about everything. But here's the thing. Whether they're silent or loud, they both feel like they're right. The tricky part is neither one of them feel heard. What I'm describing right here is not dysfunction. I'm describing survival on your teams. And so over time, that's going to show up in our outcomes. Miscommunication, slower decision making, emotional exhaustion, turnover disguised as burnout. Teams don't fail loudly. They slowly erode over time. This is the part where my organizational development brain kicks in, okay? So bear with me. Teams are emotional systems. And systems take cues from the most powerful signal in the room, which is you, the leader. They pay attention to your tone, your posture, your pace. And here's the part leaders often miss. Teams aren't disengaging because they don't care. They disengage because it doesn't feel safe to contribute. And safety is not created by policy. It's created or eroded by leadership behavior. They're protecting themselves from uncertainty. But all hope isn't lost, right? Here's the good news. The same way that leadership behavior creates withdrawal, if you're intentional about your leadership, it can actually restore trust amongst your team. And so everything that we've talked about to this point, pressure, dysfunction, teamwork, it all shows up in one place first. Can you guess where it is? No, not in strategy. No, not in decisions. Nope, not even in the values on the wall. It shows up first in how leaders listen when they're under pressure. Pressure doesn't change leaders. It changes how they listen. I use this listening ladder not as a communication model, but as a pressure diagnostic tool. You see, it answers one question for me in real time. Where did pressure just drop me? Well, why do I ask that question? Because most of us are at the top, but when pressure hits, we fall down to the bottom. The very last rung is hearing. And so this is where leaders, they hear words, right? But they miss the meaning. In high pressure moments, this can signal to your team a disinterest in how they feel, even if this is unintentional, right? And it's because your attention is split between what must get done and who's in front of you speaking. But when people feel unheard, they adjust to the new version of you, right? And so as a result, people stop sharing their ideas. Problems stay unresolved. They don't share insight because they don't feel like it's worth sharing. And so here's the skill. I want you to be visibly present, not multitasking, not half listening, but fully present. On rung 2, this is responding. So this is where leaders move too quickly. Some leaders, when pressure hits, they begin to move fast, right? They're moving fast, they're talking fast, they're justifying, they're fixing it. Well, here's a little tip. If you're talking more than the person, you're not leading. What you're doing is narrating. So here's the skill. I want you to pause and ask one clarifying question. Sounds like this. Before I respond, what feels most important for me to understand right now? This question is critical because it makes your listening visible, right? And it shows them that we want to hear what they have to say. The next rung is understanding. This is where false alignment shows up, right? And it's because leaders think that they're listening to their team, but teams still leave misaligned, right? Because everyone's in the same meeting, but they walk away all with thinking something differently was decided. What does this look like? Well, they're nodding, right? But they're not nodding in agreement. They're nodding because they want the session or the meeting to end. And so what I want you to do, the skill with this one, is reflect back meaning. An example is, what I hear is that your concern isn't the workload, it's the unpredictability of it. Am I understanding you correctly? Did I get that right? This makes people feel accurately heard and not just heard, right? It answers the real question, right? That one unasked question, which is, do you understand this the same way? A little quick tip. If you're in a meeting and you feel like more than one person can walk away feeling like they heard two different things, then you should probably regroup and re-explain. Rung 4 is validating. When leaders skip this step here, this emotional acknowledgement, people begin to disengage internally. And here's the truth that leaders need to hear. You don't have to agree to acknowledge. Just acknowledging the way that they feel brings that connection of them feeling like they've been heard. So I want you to name that emotion before the logic. I can see why that's frustrating, given the unpredictability of the situation. That's it. No fixing, no agreeing, no defending. What it does is it separates emotion from the outcome. The sentence answers that question, do you see me? Right? Rung 5 is aligning. This is where clarity lives. Okay? Alignment happens when people feel heard because they know the way forward. This is where dysfunction begins to dissolve. Not because everyone agrees, but because everyone understands. Alignment happens when leaders stay regulated long enough to listen. People feel heard and directions are clear. Therefore, the teams move together. That's leadership that holds under pressure. This is where trust turns into action and turns conversations into commitment. Alignment isn't agreement. It's a shared clarity about the next steps and the shared goal. So what I want you to remember, when pressure rises, don't fix fast. Figure out what rung did I just land on and how do I go one higher? Because teams don't disengage because leaders are wrong. They disengage when leaders move faster than trust can keep up. This listening ladder, that's how leaders can pace themselves when pressure is high. Everything we just walked through, the ladder, the pressure, the behaviors, it isn't something I learned in a book. It's something that I learned in real rooms with real stakes and real consequences. You see, before I taught leaders how to lead under pressure, I had to confront what happened to me when I didn't. Early in my leadership journey, I prided myself on being a decisive leader. When pressure showed up, I moved fast. I solved things because I thought speed was the way that I could show my strength in leadership. And so there was a moment where we were in a high pressure situation, decision needed to be made. We had limited time to discuss it, and the room was full of capable people, and I began to feel the tension rise in the room. So what I did was I listened long enough to feel like I was informed, and then I just solved it. The team nodded. There was no pushback, no debate. And I remember thinking, whew, that was good. Okay, I'm glad things went good. We're all aligned. Good to go. But what actually happened wasn't alignment. It was compliance. After that meeting, the work got done, right? But something shifted. I began to notice that fewer questions were being asked and there was less ownership and accountability. People who did things on a regular basis weren't doing it. They stopped bringing ideas to the table until they were these huge issues. Nothing was said out loud, but the team had learned something from me that day. They learned that when pressure is high, speed is what matters, not my voice. And I taught them that without even intending to. What a man in the mirror moment for me. You see, I wasn't creating clarity. I was creating silence. And the issue wasn't my decision. It was how pressure dropped me down the ladder, and I skipped misunderstanding, I skipped validation, and I mistook quiet for agreement. That experience reshaped how I lead and how I coach leaders today. Because teams don't disengage when leaders are wrong. They disengage when leaders move faster than trust can keep up. And that's why listening under pressure isn't a soft skill. It's a leadership responsibility. And so I want you to do a little exercise with me. Think of a recent high pressure moment. Got it in your head? Okay. Ask yourself this. Where did pressure drop me? What is one rung higher? How do I get there? You don't fix under pressure. You just go one rung higher. Identify where you fail and step up to the next level. Pressure has a way of clarifying things. Not who teams are, but what leadership has been teaching them all along. When things get hard, teams don't suddenly change. They reveal what they've learned about trust, safety, accountability, and each other. Some teams pull together, push through. Others pull back. The difference between the two is rarely the talent. More times than not, it's leadership. And so here's the question I want to leave you with today. When pressure hits your team, does it expose the strength, or does it expose what leadership has been avoiding all along? Next time, we'll talk about what leaders do after that moment, when the cracks are visible and trust is strained and teams know something isn't working. Because the test of leadership isn't whether dysfunction shows up. We all know dysfunction is going to show up. It's whether you know how to respond when it does. Purpose, presence, people. Leadership lives in the moments that matter most. How you listen, respond, and lead under pressure. Take one idea from today and put it into practice. Thank you for listening. And remember, lead with intention, and I'll see you next time.